What if one simple act of kindness could change someone's life forever? On a rainy evening, a one-legged girl quietly asked a struggling single father, "Can I sit here?" His simple answer brought tears to her eyes, but neither of them knew that this brief encounter would soon transform both of their lives in the most unexpected way. Stay with us until the very end, because this emotional story is filled with kindness, hope, and a life-changing twist you won't see coming. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story. Now, let's get started. Rain poured steadily over a quiet bus stop in Seattle, Washington, turning the sidewalks into shining mirrors beneath the streetlights. Most people hurried past with their heads down, eager to escape the cold evening weather. Ethan Brooks stood patiently under a faded blue umbrella, holding it carefully over his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. His jacket was soaked around the shoulders, but he made sure she stayed warm and dry. A few grocery bags rested beside his feet, filled with discounted food he had picked up after finishing another long shift at the local auto repair shop. Life had not been easy for Ethan. 2 years earlier, his wife Sarah had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him to raise Lily alone. Since then, every day had become a balancing act between work, paying bills, caring for his daughter, and trying to stay strong even when everything felt overwhelming. Some nights he skipped dinner so Lily could have an extra helping. Other times he worked overtime repairing engines just to keep the lights on in their small apartment. Despite the hardships, Ethan refused to complain. He believed that if he kept moving forward, better days would eventually come. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy, do you think the rain will stop before bedtime?" Ethan smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "I hope so, sweetheart. But even if it doesn't, we'll still make our famous hot chocolate when we get home." Her eyes lit up immediately. "With marshmallows, if we still have some left," she giggled, making Ethan forget his exhaustion for a moment. Several people waited at the bus stop, but no one spoke to one another. Most stared at their phones or watched the traffic crawl through the rain. The silence was broken only by the sound of passing cars and the distant rumble of thunder. A few minutes later, a young woman slowly approached the shelter using a pair of crutches. Her movements were careful and deliberate, each step requiring effort. One of her legs had been replaced with a sleek prosthetic that disappeared beneath her jeans. Although she carried herself with determination, there was a nervousness in her expression, as though she had already prepared herself for disappointment. She glanced around at the crowded bench before quietly asking, "Can I sit here?" For a brief moment, no one answered. Two men shifted slightly but avoided making eye contact. A woman, pretending to read messages on her phone, suddenly became deeply interested in her screen. Another passenger simply turned away. Emma lowered her eyes, clearly used to being ignored. Ethan noticed the uncomfortable silence immediately. Without thinking twice, he picked up every grocery bag from the bench and placed them on the wet ground beside his boots. "Of course," he said warmly, smiling. "Please, take the seat. Everyone deserves a place to rest." Emma looked surprised. "Are you sure? I don't want to inconvenience you." "Not at all," Ethan replied. "These bags don't mind getting a little wet." She let out a small laugh before carefully sitting down. "Thank you," she whispered. Lily smiled at the stranger with the innocent kindness only children possess. "I like your purple backpack." Emma looked down at it and smiled. For the first time that evening. "Really? It's my favorite one. It has little stars on it," Lily said happily. "Purple is my favorite color." "So is mine." The conversation instantly became easier. When the city bus finally arrived, Ethan helped Emma step aboard, making sure she had enough space without drawing attention to her disability. They found seats near each other while Lily sat beside her father, happily watching raindrops race across the window. As the bus rolled through downtown Seattle, Emma finally introduced herself. "My name's Emma Carter." "I'm Ethan," he replied, "and this little chatterbox is Lily." Emma laughed softly. "I guessed that." After a few moments of comfortable silence, Emma spoke again. "I lost my leg 3 years ago in a highway accident. A drunk driver crossed into my lane." She paused, taking a slow breath. "The doctors saved my life, but they couldn't save my leg." "I'm so sorry," Ethan said sincerely. "The hardest part wasn't learning to walk again," Emma admitted. "It was learning how differently people treated me afterward." She looked toward the front of the bus. "Sometimes people stare. Sometimes they pretend I don't exist. Sometimes they act like helping me would ruin their day." Ethan listened quietly. "Before I reached this bus stop," she continued, "I asked 3 different people if I could sit beside them while I waited. Every one of them ignored me." Lily frowned. "That's mean." Emma smiled sadly. "Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand." Ethan shook his head. My father always told me something I'll never forget," he said. "He used to say, kindness doesn't make you poorer. It makes you richer in ways money never can." I try to live by that every day." Emma stared at him for several seconds before blinking away tears. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that today." As the bus reached downtown, Ethan noticed Emma struggling with a heavy shopping bag. Before she could ask, he stood up and carried it off the bus for her. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know," Ethan answered with an easy smile. "That's exactly why I want to." Standing on the sidewalk, beneath the still falling rain, Emma accepted her bag and looked at Ethan and Lily one last time. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the seat, for reminding me there are still good people in this world." Ethan simply nodded. "Take care of yourself." Emma disappeared into the evening crowd, leaving Ethan convinced it had been nothing more than a brief encounter between strangers. Neither of them realized that fate had already begun writing the next chapter of their lives. Within a few days, a single act of kindness at a rainy bus stop would return in a way Ethan could never have imagined, changing his future and Lily's forever. 3 days passed, and Ethan barely thought about the young woman from the bus stop. Life quickly returned to its familiar routine of early mornings, long hours at the repair shop, and quiet evenings with Lily. Every dollar he earned seemed to disappear before the week ended. Rent was due, Lily needed new school shoes, and his aging pickup truck had started making a worrying noise that he couldn't afford to fix. Still, Ethan refused to let his daughter see how much pressure he was under. One Saturday morning, Lily tugged excitedly on his hand as they walked toward a neighborhood community center. "Daddy, don't forget, my school is having the family volunteer day." "I remember," Ethan replied with a smile. "Helping people is more important than sleeping in." Inside the center, dozens of volunteers packed food boxes for struggling families. Children decorated greeting cards while adults sorted canned goods and winter clothing. Ethan and Lily quietly joined the line, happy to help without expecting anything in return. About an hour later, a familiar voice called his name. "Ethan." He turned around in surprise. Standing across the room was Emma. She wore a navy blue blazer, instead of the casual clothes he'd seen at the bus stop. Her hair was neatly tied back, and although she still used her prosthetic leg, she walked with far more confidence than before. A volunteer badge hung around her neck. Lily recognized her immediately. "It's the lady with the purple backpack." Emma laughed. "I was hoping you'd remember me." "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked. "I volunteer here every weekend." Before Ethan could respond, an older gentleman approached them. "Emma, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes. I'll be there." "Mr. Harrison," the elderly man smiled politely at Ethan before walking away. Ethan looked confused. "Board meeting?" Emma nodded. "I never really told you what I do." She hesitated for a moment. "I own this community center." Ethan blinked. "You Emma, own it?" She smiled modestly. "My parents started the Harrison Foundation years ago. After my accident, I took over the family organization. We run shelters, rehabilitation programs, scholarships, and several community centers across Washington." Ethan was speechless. He had assumed Emma was simply another commuter trying to get home after work. He had never imagined she was responsible for helping thousands of people every year. Emma noticed his surprise and laughed softly. "I usually don't tell people. Once they hear my last name or learn about the foundation, they start treating me differently. I didn't even know," Ethan admitted. "I know, and honestly," he added, "it wouldn't have changed anything." Emma's smile grew warmer. "I was hoping you'd say that." Just then, Lily wandered toward a table filled with children's books. Emma watched Ethan patiently following his daughter, making sure she stayed safe while still giving her enough freedom to explore. "You really love being her dad," Emma said. Ethan looked at Lily with pride. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." Emma's expression softened. "My father was like that." "What happened to him?" "He passed away last year." "I'm sorry." She nodded quietly. "That's why I spend so much time here. It keeps his dream alive." As volunteers continued working around them, Emma noticed Ethan rubbing his sore shoulder after lifting heavy food boxes. "You're injured." "Just tired," he replied. "Working on engines all day, does that?" She looked at his worn boots, faded work shirt, and hands covered with small cuts from years of repairing vehicles. "Work very hard. I have someone depending on me." Emma smiled at Lily again. "You're doing a wonderful job." Before leaving for her meeting, Emma handed Ethan a business card. "If your repair shop ever needs a fleet maintenance contract, give me a call." Ethan accepted it politely, but laughed. "I doubt a foundation like yours would hire a tiny neighborhood garage. You'd be surprised." She walked away before he could ask another question. That evening, Ethan placed the business card inside a kitchen drawer, believing it was simply a kind gesture. He had no intention of calling. Pride had always made it difficult for him to ask anyone for help. A week later, however, disaster struck. The repair shop where Ethan had worked faithfully for nearly 12 years suddenly closed after the owner declared bankruptcy. Every employee was laid off without warning. Ethan stood outside the locked building holding a cardboard box filled with his tools. Unable to believe what had happened, his savings were almost gone. Bills were waiting at home. Christmas was only a month away. For the first time since losing his wife, fear truly settled into his heart. As he searched through his wallet for enough money to buy gas, a familiar business card slipped onto the pavement. He stared at Emma's name for a long moment. Perhaps fate had not brought them together by accident, after all. Ethan stood beside his old pickup truck, staring at the business card in his hand. Rain clouds drifted across the Seattle sky, reminding him of the evening he had first met Emma. He had never been comfortable asking anyone for help. Throughout his life, he had believed that hard work should be enough. But now, with no job, bills piling up, and Lily depending entirely on him, his pride no longer mattered as much as her future. After taking a deep breath, he dialed the number. The phone rang only once. Ethan, Emma answered, sounding pleasantly surprised. "I was wondering if you'd ever call." He laughed awkwardly. "I honestly wasn't planning to. I figured as much." He hesitated before explaining what had happened at the repair shop. Emma listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was a brief silence. "I want you to come to our headquarters tomorrow morning," she finally said. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for charity." "I'm not offering charity," Emma replied gently. "I'm offering an opportunity." The next morning, Ethan arrived at the Harrison Foundation's headquarters wearing his only dress shirt, one that had been neatly ironed the night before. The modern glass building overlooked the Seattle waterfront, and employees hurried through the lobby carrying laptops and folders. Ethan felt completely out of place. Emma greeted him personally. "I'm glad you came." She led him through the building, introducing him to staff members who smiled warmly. Finally, they entered a conference room where several executives were waiting. One of them stood and shook Ethan's hand. "So, you're the mechanic Emma has been talking about?" Ethan looked confused. "Talking about?" Emma smiled. "After we met at the bus stop, I became curious. I asked around and learned you've spent 12 years repairing vehicles with almost no customer complaints. Your former employer described you as the most honest mechanic he'd ever hired." Ethan looked embarrassed. "I was just doing my job." "Exactly," Emma replied. "That's what impressed me." She explained that the Harrison Foundation operated dozens of vans and service vehicles across Washington. For years, they had outsourced repairs to different companies, spending thousands of dollars while constantly dealing with delays and inconsistent service. "My father always dreamed of opening our own maintenance center," Emma said. "He wanted to create jobs for hardworking people who deserved a second chance." She looked directly at Ethan. "I think you're the right person to build it." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "You mean, manage it?" "I mean run it." The room fell silent. One executive slid a folder across the table. Inside was a detailed proposal. The foundation would fund a brand new vehicle maintenance facility, complete with modern equipment, training programs for young mechanics, and apprenticeships for military veterans and people with disabilities. Ethan would serve as operations director, earning a salary far greater than he had ever imagined. I don't know what to say," Emma smiled. "Say, yes." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't have a college degree. You have experience. I've never managed a business. You've managed a family through the hardest years of your life." "I might fail." Emma shook her head. "The man who gave away his seat to a stranger without expecting anything in return isn't afraid of hard work. That's exactly the kind of leader we need." For several seconds, Ethan couldn't speak. Finally, he nodded. Yes, months passed, and the maintenance center became one of the foundation's greatest successes. Ethan hired experienced mechanics alongside young apprentices who had struggled to find opportunities elsewhere. Veterans, single parents, and individuals recovering from difficult circumstances all found meaningful work there. The workshop wasn't just fixing vehicles, it was rebuilding lives. Lily loved visiting after school. She proudly told everyone that her dad was the boss, though Ethan always laughed and reminded her that he was simply part of a great team. One afternoon, as the staff celebrated the center's first anniversary, Emma pulled Ethan aside. "Do you remember what I asked you the day we met?" He smiled. "You asked if you could sit there." She nodded. "I wasn't crying because my leg hurt." Ethan looked at her quietly. "I had just come from a hospital where I spoke with new amputees. I spent the whole day encouraging them not to lose hope, but inside, I was struggling myself. When those people ignored me at the bus stop, it reminded me of every painful moment after my accident. For a few minutes, I felt invisible again." She paused, her voice trembling. "Then you moved your groceries onto the wet ground without a second thought. You didn't stare at my prosthetic. You didn't pity me. You simply treated me like any other person." Tears welled in her eyes. That simple answer, of course, "Everyone deserves a place to rest," gave me back something I thought I'd lost. "What was that?" Ethan asked softly. "My faith that kindness still exists." Ethan